everyone, it's Kerry back with you today. I've been having a play around with some faux vintage documents and I wanted to create some of this faux vintage sticky tape that looked like it's been on there for a while. And I've made some in the past where you actually stick real sticky tape down onto plastic and then colour it, but I didn't want to do it that way this time because A, I'm too lazy, and B, the sticky tape that I had wasn't the right width. I only had like really skinny tape, or I had very fat packing tape. So I had a look in my craft room and I found some glassine paper and it's worked a treat. So I'm going to show you today what I've done, how I've created it, and then some of the ways that you can use it. So let's get started. So what you see here are the strips that I created, and I made all these strips in probably less than 5 minutes. And all I've got here are some pieces of glassine paper that I've cut down into strips. So you can of course cut them down into whatever size strip you like, but even if you cut them into sort of wider strips to begin with, you can then of course cut them down after you've created them and use them for smaller projects that way. So I'm just going to pop these off to the side here. The other things that I'll be using are some alcohol inks, and I've got these in sort of vintage browns and sort of orangey gold colours. And some alcohol blending solution, and I've got a foam blending tool. Now I know you're supposed to use the felt applicators, but I didn't have any, so I just went with what I had. So I'm just going to sit these up here in front of me. And the other thing that I've got is just a plastic cellophane bag. If you use something plastic, the alcohol obviously won't penetrate through the surface, but also you can just reuse the same plastic over and over again, and whatever alcohol ink is on the surface will just get sort of revamped when you put wet medium on top of it. So I'll bring in some of my glassine strips. Now I've got quite a chunk of strips here. I don't know, there's probably 10, maybe more, and I'm just going to sit them there. I've got my tool, and I'm going to add a little bit of the alcohol blending solution on there just to sort of reactivate the colours that are already in there. And then I'm just going to add a couple of different colours of the alcohol ink on top. This one happens to be butterscotch. And this one's latte. So just a few drops of that. And then I can just grab hold of one end of my glassine strips and I can just start wiping it onto the surface. Now, I don't know why, but the alcohol penetrates through the glassine paper. So I'm actually colouring multiple layers at once. I can just sort of pounce it on there just to make sure that it is going through those layers. And if you're unsure, you can peel the layers apart and have a look and see if it's penetrating through enough. And then I can just sit those aside. Now you can of course do them one at a time, just wiping it on, but I'm too lazy and I just want to get it done so I can use them. Now as your tool dries out or your alcohol evaporates, you might need to add a little bit more blending solution or some more colour. Oops. Just add a little bit more there. Pick up some of this colour that's already on here. Alright, and then I just set those aside. Now they will dry eventually, even if they're in a bit of a stack. Here's some that I coloured before, and these are still sort of stacked up. Feels quite dry now, and you can just literally peel them apart with the glassine paper, and they just come apart, and each one is coloured. Now, if you had some that didn't have enough colour on, or you weren't happy with the markings or whatever, you can go back in with the damp alcohol sponge and just reactivate it. It's almost like the glassine has, a coating on it. So the other good thing about doing them this way is that once you have coloured all your strips and you're ready to store them, you can just slide them all into a plastic pouch or into some kind of container. You don't have to stack them all up neatly. They'll just store just fine crumpled up, or even, in a stack. So there we go, I've got all those in my pouch now. So once you've created them and they're dry, you can of course cut them down and use smaller pieces like I have here. You can even use them as a hinge on other pieces of paper. You would probably need to reinforce both sides. You can use them to go over a tear or something like that. They just give that sort of vintage vibe to the papers that you're using them with. And the way that I like to use them once I've created them is, let's say for example I just wanted to pop a little piece on here. I just get my glue stick and add some glue onto my page, and then you can literally just place it down over your glue and then tear it away where you don't want it, and then you get the faux vintage tape look there. So here's the stacks that we coloured just a few moments ago. They are still a little bit wet in the middle, but you can easily start separating them and just leaving them to dry. Or it doesn't matter if you pop them away when they're a little bit damp. They're not going to, stick together and not be able to be separated. So as you can see, you can make heaps in a really short amount of time, and I love the fact that you can just chuck them in a bag and store them for when you need them. So I did try the technique using a few other mediums, and I wasn't really happy with the results. This was using a watercolour brush pen. Now it did blend out slightly, but I still had very significant marks where I had applied the watercolour brush. This one here was tea, and whilst I really like the look and the crinkle, I didn't want the tape to be crinkly. I wanted it to be still nice and flat like sticky tape. So I do like the tea, and it will be great for other uses, but not for this particular use. I also tried oxide ink, but I didn't like the unevenness and also the opaqueness that it gave me. And this one was done with Lindy's watercolour sprays. Now again, I like the colour and I will use this in other applications, but I didn't like the sort of wrinkly look. I wanted it to stay nice and flat like sticky tape would. So there we go. I thought I'd just share that with you today, as I found it much easier than colouring each individual piece of sticky tape. I do have some glassine paper in the shop if you're interested. I'll pop a link to that in the description box below. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you again next time. Bye.